Hi everyone, welcome to the Tradies Family Podcast. I'm your host Frankie, the founder of the Tradies Family. I'm here to bring you practical, down-to-earth advice and support for partners of trade business owners, helping you achieve that elusive work-life family balance. I understand what it's like to be in your shoes. As the wife of Greg Allen, trade business owner and founder of the Tradies Success Academy, I've ridden the roller coaster and I've learned firsthand the challenges, struggles, juggles, and joy that living within a trade business can be. So if you're ready to reclaim your work-life-love balance, join me on this journey. Let's support each other and figure this out together. Today we're going to dive deep into a crucial topic, knowing what you're getting yourself into. We all have dreams and ambitions, but it's essential to have a clear understanding of the path we're about to take. It's like setting out on a journey. You need a map, a compass, and a plan to reach your destination. In this episode, Kirk, my favourite long-term coach at TSA, shares his insights into success. So if you're ready to get that mindset in the right gear, stick around. Yeah, on the Tradies Family Podcast, so welcome.
Oh, thank you. Excited.
Awesome. So I guess, introduce yourself. What's your background?
My name's Kirk, and I'm a coach now. But I've known you and Greg for a very long time. We've worked together for, 11-ish years, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
Long time. So obviously have been very connected to each other's journey right the way through, and as different challenges have arisen in life and in business, and we've navigated those spaces alongside each other, which I think gives us great perspective on being able to help other people navigate that journey as well, because we can bounce from both sides. And so then helped build Response and turn it into something what it is today. And then now I coach in the academy and help business owners grow and scale their businesses and realize the success and the potential that they're sitting on, and also work towards that time freedom and get themselves back to a position where their business is a real true asset and providing for them instead of it being a liability that they have to provide for.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've always loved about working with you is just not just like your honesty and sort of transparency in situations, but also your ability to sort of like look beyond the situation. So, the situation is X, Y, Z, and then instead of just sort of honing into that problem or the excitement or whatever it is, it's the ability to sort of look beyond that and sort of try and understand. Often it's like mindset of like what's sort of going on underneath that or beyond that that requires that challenge. So thank you for bringing that to our lives all those years ago in business and all the things. But today we're going to have a bit of chat. Like we're talking briefly before about like you said sacrifices, and I said transitions. So, and I guess when you said sacrifices, it initially made me thought about the startup to business.
Oh, you didn't think Aztecs and like slaughtering animals or anything like that?
No,
Or humans?
no, hang on. Bring it back. This is a family show, Kirk. A family show.
Yep.
No, that's like just the sacrifices that are required when you go from being employed, and you're sort of like all gung ho about starting a business. This is going to be amazing, and it's sort of like I guess these peaks and troughs of like it's the dream, and I'm super excited about this idea, and then you work so hard at launching it, and then you get there, and like for a while there's traction, but like anything in life, you're going to experience some lows or some sort of pitfalls and going in there. So if you want to start, just I guess like as we were talking about before, just that journey from and sacrifices going from being employed to self-employed. So what does it take for someone who hasn't started a business yet, like is thinking about starting their trade business and hasn't yet, or for those people who are and experiencing those times, what do you think are some of the main themes of sacrifices that people are experiencing when they go from being employed to then starting their own trade business?
Yeah, well, I think the critical difference is when you're employed, you get paid for hours. Yeah, so you just do your hours, and then different level of employees take a certain amount of extra stuff home with them, but for the most part, you're not paid to take it home. You're paid to clock in, clock out. But when you start a business, it is home. It is your life. It is what you think about. It's while you sit there having a coffee, you're thinking about how do I do this better, or how do I work this, or what is my approach here. So I think one of the biggest sacrifices that people don't really acknowledge or even anticipate is the sacrifice of mind space, of headspace,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
because it consumes you. And I don't want to say this in like a patronizing way, but it sort of has to. Yeah, it
Yeah.
has to consume you because you need that level of attention for it to be
Mm,
successful. And so if you're
mm.
not thinking about it while you're at the park, while you're here, while you're there, then you might not be applying the right amount of sort of mental intensity that you need to find the solutions to get you through that really challenging initial phase.
Sure, but when you're saying it should consume you, I mean, how does that reflect in work-life balance, Kirk?
Yes, no, it does. Yeah, exactly. So I think you do have to work on strategies for balancing that.
Mm,
And I think like one of the things that I help a lot of guys with is you have to change your expectations on what reality looks like now, and therefore your reality will, as a default, will be different. So you need different strategies to be able to protect the things and the people in your life from you
mm.
turning into an all-consumed monster that only
Yes,
thinks about business. And so that's what I mean by one of the most overlooked sacrifices is that headspace. And because people don't acknowledge that, hey, the second I start a business, that's all I'm going to think about. I need those protections in place so that I can disconnect from that
hmm,
in those moments that I need to, but then allow myself to, while I'm out on a run, I could be thinking about business and feel positive about that. Feel
yeah,
like
sure.
not that I can't get my business out of my head, but like, hey, I'm out running and I'm thinking about this. And not that that's a negative consequence of running a business, but it's actually a positive because you frame that into the right space of your day.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and it's sorry to interrupt you, but in that sort of it makes me think of like, sometimes when you're excited about something and you go and do it, and when it is your own business, like it's work, right? But when you're excited about something and you sort of think, oh, work-life balance, okay, right now I should be relaxing,
yeah,
or right now I should be not working, or right now I shouldn't be, it's fast past 5 p.m. 5 p.m. So I shouldn't be doing any work right now. As long as you don't have any other responsibilities like parenting responsibilities or expectations from other people in your family unit or whatever, if that's what you want to do, then and that's what you're excited about, and because it's your business, it's sort of like, well, why can't you do it?
yeah, and there's that's where the balancing act really comes into it. I think it's highlighted the unfortunately people become acutely aware of this probably way too late in the piece, and it normally occurs on the first like family holiday they have after starting a business
Yeah.
because they realize that holidays are completely different. I used to go on holidays and I used to relax and I used to have nothing in my head and I could read a book and I could do this, but now I go on holidays and all I can think about is, oh, what's happening, oh, what's this client doing, what's that client doing,
Yes.
and it's then they come back and they go, this is not right. Like but unfortunately, without those, without you creating the right structures to be able to disconnect, and I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to do, it's a very challenging thing to do, but
Mm.
without creating that framework, you will allow those moments that are super special to other people in your life to be consumed by your thoughts taking over around business and things like that.
Absolutely. That makes me think of, I was talking to Greg about, like our experience in running a trade business and the effects of that. And, and we're sort of thinking, when was the first time, it actually hit home that, this is actually hard. And for us, Greg started his business, he got his first employee. Then there was the RCDs, installment that everyone in WA or I don't know if it was Australia wide has to have 2 RCDs. So then he got a lot of work on the back of that. Then there was the senior discounts. He got a lot of work about on the back of that. But when we went on our honeymoon, and that was cut short, like our honeymoon, like for
Yeah,
all the times that you dream about your wedding and everything, up until that time we had our wedding and then we're on honeymoon, and we actually had our honeymoon short because a staff member left. And even like the whole time on our honeymoon, we had, Greg's like writing emails, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
look, it's the Eiffel Tower. And he's standing there writing an email. It's like, oh my God, there's business already. And I think that was probably like 3 years into running business. It was like, okay, I still wasn't okay with it by then,
Oh,
that
yeah.
that this was going to run our life. But it was the first time that it, like, and not the last time that it interfered in our holidays, or like big milestones of our life. So it's really interesting when you're saying that it consumes you so much, and your first holiday is such a big deal. And obviously it's still in my mind because that's the first thing that I think of when I remember that. But
Yeah.
I wonder, like, when it comes to so for people who do feel like they're all consumed, and it's and they feel like they're sacrificing the time with their family, because it's also consuming. What sort of structures can you put in place to try and make sure that your business mind and like growth mind and ideas and excitement isn't like spilling over the edges into the other
Yeah.
parts of life that aren't business? Because believe it or not, life isn't business, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's about firstly identifying that it is all within your control. A lot of the time, people think like, "Oh yeah, this I have to do this." And as a business owner, one of the greatest perks about being a business owner is that there's no one to tell you what to do. It's also one of the greatest risks as well,
Yes,
because there's no one to tell you what to
yes.
do. And quite often we think, oh yeah, great, I'm going to start a business and then I won't have a boss telling me what to do. But you replace that one boss with 100 or 1,000 clients telling you what to do. So like there's always this pressure that you're conforming to someone else's expectation of what you need to do. But at the core of being a business owner is you actually have control. You can
Yeah.
choose when you do things and why you do things. And if that choice negatively impacts a particular client for whatever matter, then if you've made that as a proactive choice and you're comfortable with the result or the net outcome of that because it creates a positive aspect somewhere else, then you should be comfortable with being able to weigh up that balance. But most
Mm.
people, they sit so heavily on one side of the scale. Yeah, I often encourage people to look at this as an exercise in taking back control of their schedule. People are like, oh no, I'm just so busy. I'm just so busy. And I'm like, okay, next Wednesday, what would happen if you started at 9 a.m. instead of 7 a.m.? They're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, could you take next Wednesday's client and schedule them at 9 o'clock, or schedule your first meeting from, instead of it being at 8 o'clock, make it 9 o'clock? And they're like, well, I guess so. And I'm like, would the world stop?
Mm.
Would your business crumble down around you if you did that? Well, probably not. Brilliant. What if you took your wife or partner out to breakfast on Wednesday morning, had a bit of like human interaction, had a nice breakfast, had a decent chat, and then went to work? Would that change the dynamic at home for the week in a positive way?
Absolutely.
And if everything doesn't crumble, you can't take 6 hours a day to go and spend it by the pool and drink cocktails all day every day of the week, because nothing will get done. But you don't
Yeah.
need that amount of time, but you do need deliberate, structured time
Mm.
that you are giving back to those people in your life and your family. Because at the moment, people get stuck in giving all of their time to their clients.
Yeah. And do you think there's, I mean, like that rush, that ever, I mean, like, I guess, lots of people, maybe they're looking for a certain amount of money in their bank. Maybe they've got a goal for a holiday, a goal for paying off their house. Maybe, it's that operational time freedom. But like, do you think the rush to get there is, do you think that's what's pushing people to, work during family dinners, or, not take that time out on purpose? Do you think it's the rush to get to the goal? Like, the faster I work, like the more I work and the faster I work, the sooner I'll get to the finish line, which then I can relax?
I think that's a default sort of feeling within people, definitely. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, if I just keep doing this for long enough, it'll all be good, and then we'll have heaps of time.
Yeah.
But
Right.
what you actually do is you condition yourself to a working capacity that becomes the norm. And then it's very hard for people to transition away from that. So yeah, at the start, you might need to sacrifice a bit of time to do work of an evening. Yeah,
Yeah.
invoicing and quoting. And, that's for a lot of people, that's a reality. That's part of the initial sacrifice that you need to make.
Yeah.
But there is a point at which you've made that sacrifice for long enough that the business no longer requires you to do that to be
Yeah.
successful. But you've built such a habit around doing it that it's very hard for you to release it, because if you release it, you feel guilty. You feel like, oh, I should be doing that. I should be doing that because I have been doing that in the past. So that's where I think people really struggle, is taking back control and going, we're at a point now, no more nights. How good is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they feel like, oh, what are the opportunities I might miss if I'm not working those nights?
Yeah, right. But then, like you say, like it's sort of, I guess there's sort of like, two parts because like in my experience, being a tradie wife, of like the startup phase and then for all those years of just pushing it and every month just trying to get profitable or every month even just trying to break even. um it's it, like for us it went on for years and years of trying to get it right, and it was just like for the more effort, like I guess I'm talking about a relationship. You just the more the flowers grow where you water the garden, right? So if you're going to put effort and work into your relationship, which is taking out that time and making sure like people talk about date night, and it's like harp on about date night, but in date night doesn't have to mean going out to dinner, but even just making that time like you're suggesting, instead of scheduling at 7 but at 9, just making that time to connect, because like it can take a while to get to the point that your business that where you want to get it, depending on what that goal is, but it's not worth losing your relationships
Oh,
in the
no way.
meantime,
No.
like to arrive at your goal, and then have to fix your relationship. um you know Sometimes what's the point?
Yeah, life's too short to miss the moments that you're meant to be there for, and what makes everything um, worthwhile at the end of the day. I can assure you that, like, at the end of everything, and you're laying there on your taking your last couple of days in, I
Mm,
don't think they're going to say, geez, I'm stoked I did all that work at night.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm glad I got all those invoices done when I did, because otherwise we'd be screwed now. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just not a thought that would enter anyone's head at that space. It's just when you are in that moment, like you said, that there's that rush, there's this passion, and that rush and the passion is important because that's what drives you forward. But
Mm,
it has to be bridled, and people self-sacrifice and martyr their time,
mm,
and I think it's a worth equation as well. I think if you martyr enough of your time and you feel like I've given that much time to my business, then
mm.
you almost protect yourself to be like, I can't try any harder. Yeah, so this is the
Right.
best I can. I'm now worthy because I've spent every last second of every last moment trying to make this work, and therefore I
Yeah.
feel good about myself. But that's a
And
that,
sorry, go.
sorry, you go.
No, it just made me think of, like work smarter, not harder.
Oh, definitely. It's like, but when you're lacking the leverage to work smarter, like you can't see a better way, or you can't see a different way, or you can't see another way to do something, then the default is like, if I just put enough time into this, then at least I can go to bed and
Mm,
feel in my soul that I've tried hard enough. Whereas if
yeah.
I don't put the time in and this fails, then I'll know inside myself that maybe I didn't put all of myself into this.
Yeah, right.
But then people will do that for their business, but then they don't approach relationships with the same level of intensity either. Yeah.
No.
So imagine if you did. Imagine if you approached relationships with the people in your family and people that you like and love with that same level of intensity, where I'm not going to bed until I feel like I've put enough effort into all of these spaces to make sure that it's the best it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
world would be a very different place if people could see or adopt that in a social capacity, not
Yeah.
just in a business capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to Greg about this the other night about how like, you know, Disney movies stuffed us all. Like, and the love stories and the love chase of like, anyone, Cinderella, Pocahontas, I mean, Rapunzel in every single Disney movie, really. And then they lived happily. Fairy tale. It's been happening for years, and then they lived happily ever after. Like as though once you're married, that's it. You know,
Yeah.
like it's. And I remember when Greg and I had our first like argument after we were married, and I had to like stop myself because in my head I was like, if he thinks this is okay, then he's got something coming because. And it's like, oh shit, we're married now. Like you have to work on it and you have to put the effort in and you can't just expect the other person to just be there through thick and thin. I mean, like divorce rates are huge these days, right? Um,
Oh yeah, and I imagine, I'm not sure on the data, but I imagine with trades and especially
mm,
small business owners as well, I think those rates
yes.
would be increased due to the level of attention that it pulls away from relationship building,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
people their time gets sucked and consumed, and their headspace gets consumed with what they're searching for the answers, they're searching for a way forward, they're searching for success.
yeah.
And part of that success is like an internal validator. Some part of that success is external, like I need to provide for my family, or I need to impress my parents, or I need to make someone proud, or I need to do this so that I can beat the guy at school because he was an asshole to me. Like there's a lot of different motivators as to why people push that forward. Um, but I think that the key is just like the people that are the most balanced and the people that end up having the most success are the people that can apply the right amount of effort and intensity for the longest period of time.
Mm,
So, and when you start your business, you could throw all your time into it, but you can only do that for so long. And then how long
it's
does it
like
take you to cook?
endurance.
Yeah. Whereas
Yeah.
if you put the right amount in, if you put the right amount of effort in and application into your business, then you will grow nice, solid, consistently, because you'll be able to produce that effort week in, week out,
Yeah.
forever. Not like I'm going to throw everything at it and then cook myself. Then I'm going to be a little bit down on my self worth and self value because I'm working really hard and not seeing any result yet. And in the process, now I've got this little bit of friction in my home life or in my personal relationships because
Mm,
now I've got this like, so now I'm feeling like I'm getting it from all angles, and then it's very hard to perform at your best under those conditions.
yeah. Yeah.
So the people that will be the most successful in the long term are the people that can balance those two things. And you look at like successful business people, um, the success of business entities is quite often linked with a the successful window in business is linked with a successful home life.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So you look at like, for example, you'll see like very successful people, um, the Twiggy Forrest and his wife just split up, but they've been together for 35 years. So there's
Mm,
this established, settled home life that enables the success of businesses, and I think you'll see that play out in a whole heap of different spaces. Jeff Bezos with his wife and different things like that. The
yeah.
big impressive growth phases in big companies have come off the back of a very stable and what's the word I'm looking for?
It's like solid foundations. Like I
Yeah,
guess is that sort of like where you're going. It's like solid foundations. Like you've got the base to. If you come home to a solid base and you're both supported like in your relationship, then that is the solid foundations, or at least like like the quality of the soil that that the tree grows from. So it's
yeah.
sort of like you can be your best self because you can come home to a landing space that your relationship nourishes you from. So is that where you're sort of going with that?
Well, yeah, but I don't think that's by accident. I don't think those successful people got lucky and just had a great wife, for example. That although they were busy growing their business, very successful entities, they also prioritized the time back into that home front,
Yeah,
yeah, to ensure that this was a good synergy.
yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of success stories there that are built off the back of that.
I guess, and like when you're sort of talking about back to when you're talking about the pros and cons of being your own boss, um, and enjoying yeah, the pros and cons of that. The good thing about being employed is that you go to work and you know exactly what to do, right? where as in maybe there's some quiet times in business and you're sort of going there and you don't quite not know what to do. You've got this sort of panicked feeling, and you're trying to, you need more work, and maybe you've got staff on, or maybe you don't, but you sort of don't know by the end of the day, like if you've been productive or not. And I guess it's, just I'm just thinking about our journey, as in Greg and I's journey, and just trying to put together all the pieces to try and make it work. And Greg is very self-motivating, so he's always doing something. But then when he decided to create the academy, it's sort of like using all the pieces and those big lessons that we learned or he learned to make it easier, and so people can follow a path. So unapologetic plug for the academy, but it's just I don't know, we're just talking about so many struggles, and I just think back, like if we had, I just believe in the product so much that if we had a pathway to follow, it would feel as though, okay, today I've got to do X, Y, Z, and it wouldn't always feel like he was chasing his tail, because it just, for so long, there's just so many things of like, will this work? Won't that work? Should I go back to marketing? Should I go back to lead gen? Should I go back to, you're just wearing all these hats all the time, when if there's a clear path, it's kind of more like a checklist. And even that, how that sort of like blends through to family life, because in our experience, we did have two young kids when we, amongst setting up the business and all the highs and lows. So, and it's all those lessons that we learned in like what works and what doesn't, so we can sort of come out the end where you do have this time and operational freedom, and you're still a solid foundation as a family unit. So it just like that whole, it just made me think of that whole working smarter and not harder.
Well, and it sort of comes back to what I said before about like one of the great things is that there's no one to tell you what to do, but it's also
Yeah,
one of the greatest vulnerabilities is sometimes there's no one to tell you what to do, and you would love someone just to pipe up and say, "Hey, do this. This will
yeah,
be right.
yeah,
This will work for you." Yeah. Or I've tried this. I had a great result. Try this. And like that's where we sit. It's this that we're not trying to be the boss of anyone, but when you, as a business owner, you sometimes need people to tell you what to do in a way, like to give
yeah,
you that advice, to give you that guidance, because yeah, it's the unknown that creates all the stress. Yeah, like you would know this around anxiety. Like anxiety is just the fear of what's unknown. Yeah, it's like
yeah.
I am I going to have any clients next week? Am I going to have any jobs? Am I going to be able to pay these bills? Am I going to be able to do this? And that compounds when you know the nothing in business is ever a given. Everything could go away tomorrow. Everything could come again for the next day.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, usually
it,
does.
there's always this there's always this there's always this external pressure that will create a scenario that can build anxiety if you don't have a way to manage and mitigate that. And I think the ability to bounce ideas off people or get some guidance
Yeah,
removes a bit of that fog, creates a bit of clarity around what comes next, and that just the faith in having someone else to be able to say, "Hey, I think you should try this," and then whether that outcome works or doesn't work, there's always going to be another solution there for you. Yeah. Oh, okay. What do we do next? What do we do next? And I think that's really like what we set up here is an amazing platform that allows people to, when they need that, they reach out and they go, "Hey, I don't really know what to do next. What do you think?"
yeah, and even being in when you're in the work, it's so hard to get clarity of what else needs to happen, for you to sort of get, it's sort of like digging yourself into a deep hole.
Yeah.
And, the more you sort of like dig in the hole and dig at the problem, the deeper the hole gets, and then it's really hard to see what's happening outside the little hole that you're in,
Oh, yeah. It's
whether or
impossible.
not that's like the marketing hole, or like the lead gen hole or sales or whatever it is. It's so hard to see what else can happen, and when you do sort of poke your head up out of that hole, you can see that it's a knock-on effect. Like if you go and do this, then it will help with that, and this will help with that, but you need someone who's out of the hole to see all the potential holes and then how to make the underground tunnels to link all the holes up so you're not just stuck.
Well, I lived this because for so long there were so many things that I tried and did that changed the outcome within the business. So I was like, okay, I was doing it a particular way. Then I decided, let's change it to do it this way. And then that worked a bit better. And I was like, cool, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Or I might try something different in that capacity and it might not work. And it's all these little tryings of things. Some worked really well, some didn't work. But I never had the time to actually process. They were just like, let's try this. I didn't, there
Reactive.
wasn't a lot of deliberate, like I'd always think they were going to work, otherwise I wouldn't try them. But like there wasn't a lot of like deep thought on that. It was
Yeah.
like this needs to be fixed now. It's like I'm bleeding, I need a band-aid. Like I hope this is enough. Yeah.
Hemorrhaging.
And now that I'm in a coaching capacity, I look at like those things that I did along the journey that changed and what worked and changed it didn't work. And now I have the time to think deeply on them and work out like what are the mechanics that were actually at play there. Because there's always underlying mechanics that create or drive an outcome in a change, whether it's going to be positive or negative.
Yeah.
And now I can link those things that I'm like, I now know because I have the time and space to look at things, why things work. Whereas
Yeah.
back then, I was just like, thank Christ that worked. I don't know what I would have done.
Because
And
now you've got
now,
the bigger picture.
yeah, and now that I've got this appreciation of the bigger picture and the mechanics that were at play to make that scenario work, I now can work on things that play to those mechanics that work even better, for
Yeah.
example. All right, but now I can also explain the mechanics to people so they can also find their way to leverage that same set of input, for example. And
Yeah.
that's the real goal. But you can't. I could never do it. I think it would be very very impressive for someone to be able to have the ability to link all of that together in the moment while they're searching for the answer.
Yeah.
Because I just plug things in and hope they work here and hope they work there. And then now I look at all the things that I plugged in and I go, why did that work so well when I moved from
Yeah.
that point to that point? And I can
Yeah.
break all that down.
And then other things, why didn't that work?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
then you understand so much more of the why. And I think that's what I try to teach people. It's not just do this. So if I could teach you the why this scenario worked well for us, then you can build your own scenario that plays to the same ingredients or the same process that is uniquely yours and addresses the problem even more acutely than what I could tell you what to do.
Yeah. And so going back to like, I mean, the theme of sacrifices and when and like, so many people, and in my mind I can go straight back there. It's like, my partner was working, so my Greg was working the whole time, constantly on the business. And I know you remember also well, like by the end of it, I put a strict deadline at 4 p.m. And it was like drop everything and run. And it was like, do you remember Greg
Oh,
leaving at 4?
yes, of course I do. Mid sentence, the alarm would go off, and he'd be
Oh, did
like,
he have an
"Gotta go."
alarm? Good. Gotta
Yeah,
go. It's 4 o'clock.
yeah. But like and that was
And like,
How did you find that strategy for home?
yeah, like, because I mean, to get to that point, I just had to get, I was pulling my hair out for so long. And, like, I can't underestimate the transition from, being a first time mum for me was just like hectic. Like Greg and I got together, I think, because we're both super passionate people. And for a long time, we worked independently, as a couple, but like independently. And it's sort of like, and, as one person's project wound down, the other, then we'd just sort of like have dinner together, but we were always working on something. And then when we had our first child, it was like, oh my God, we have to actually work as a team. And then it was like Greg's working on his business and, of course, the ups and downs of working, 12 to 14-hour days. And then by the time it was just months and months and months, and it was like, I have to put a stop to this because come 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock or whatever, this is a witching hour. This is a really
Mm.
difficult time. I need some help. We didn't have any other help at that stage, and I needed some help. So I drilled it into him so hard, which obviously he set alarm for to drop everything and come home, because
Yeah.
it was just for like until 6:30 when dinner time was finished and bath time was done. It was just a couple of hours a day that I just needed help.
And
'Cause
when,
it was breaking point before that. Like Greg and I are pretty open about, like, we talked about separation twice, and that was, we have 2 kids. So things are like hard, and
yeah,
that's when we needed help. But to have to put those, like really structured things in place, to make sure that, I felt supported, and I was getting what I felt like our family needed to, for him to run the business, but for us to also work as a family. So yeah, I felt supported as a mum, and I could actually get things done, and as a family.
so that's the outcome, which is brilliant. And then
Mm,
this comes back to what we were saying about not um, understanding how little impact that would actually have. Like,
yeah,
so if you didn't do that, and Greg stayed at work till 6:30 at night every night, yeah,
yeah,
and carried on the way it was going,
yeah.
would have the business journey been drastically different? I think not.
It's like, I mean, at that time, he would have said yes, like, you're bleeding the business.
Yeah,
But it's for me, it was sort of like, at first I felt like I could be like, okay, can you just come home? Like, can you just try and be home before, 5:30? And everything would, it's always something, because it's always something, like something leads on to something, and then a client's unhappy, and then I've just got to finish this invoicing, and then if I just don't get back to this email, and then like, oh, I'll just quickly Google this thing because it might be a solution to everything. It's always, 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 always something. And like,
yeah,
I understand that's super exciting, but there also comes a point where it's sort of like, when you don't have your, when you are your own boss. And I think in this case, I was Greg's like boss at home, that it was like, you have to make this deadline. I need you home at 4.
yeah.
And so it sounds like he took that really seriously. So I'm really
Oh,
grateful.
and like I've spoken to him about the success of that strategy as well, because like it it
Oh,
has
good. Because for me, I was like, oh my God, everybody thinks I'm a major BITCH, I was struggling, and I was like, I can't cope if you're not here.
yeah, and the success was that was forced, but it actually, like, it highlights that point where you are in control. So Greg had the ability to stop at 4 and
Yeah,
go home. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's just he in the previous time he was just, there was other things that he could be doing.
yeah,
And they were
absolutely.
important too. They were important. But by stopping there and making that a hard deadline, what that did
Yeah,
is that actually created efficiency in what we do, because now you have a timeline where I've only got till 4. So I have to
mm,
prioritize the things that I was going to do today and do the important stuff. And then a lot of the non-important stuff that would just waste time and just sort of chew up bandwidth and space was actually left on the table. So the output, and why I said that before, is like that strategy of leaving at 4, if you had not implemented that and Greg had worked through till 6:30, the business is in no different position to what it is today.
yeah,
No
yeah,
discernible difference down the line. Yeah, but what it did for the home life is it
yeah,
solidified that. It gave you the support that you were looking for. And I think
hmm,
that's what people really need to notice is like 2 hours here, 2 hours there means all the world in the
yes.
home
And
life.
home, yeah, 100%.
And at the end of the day, it means so little in the overall journey of your business.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Oh, I
that's
feel like
this.
that was such, I mean, like, it's so funny, Kirk. Even, we're so far, like, haven't been working in response for so long, but even hearing you say that is so validating for me during that time. It's like, oh, yes, because it's even when you talk about, like, people on their deathbed. It's not like everyone said, like, oh, they're dying and they're like, oh, I'm glad I did that invoicing. Like that also, me being really strict with that 4 o'clock deadline is, like that enabled Greg and our children to have, that connection on those early years of life. And,
Yeah.
that, like I've worked as a palliative nurse before with people as they're passing away. And I promise you, like one of the things that like majority of people say is, I wish I'd spent more time with my kids,
Mm.
like, and even parents that you talk to, now they have that look in their eye like, oh, it doesn't last long, they grow up so quick. And it's, I mean, God, if you're working in the business the whole time, you are literally going to miss those years.
And from my perspective, seeing and working with so many, like coach thousands of business owners,
Mm,
those few hours that you put in of a night or an evening, there's certain phases of your business where that's critically important, but those phases are very small. And
yeah,
if you continue with those habits longer than is absolutely necessary, you are doing that at the detriment of your personal relationships and to really no greater good for your business. You're
yeah.
not going to get anywhere dramatically faster or any further or any more successful than what you would if you stopped 2 hours earlier. The
And
truth,
is it,
the truth of the matter is, no one is that important.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you can't create that much impact with a few hours a week of an evening, but you can in your personal life. Yeah,
And
that
isn't that why so many people have the business in the first place? It's like for their families, for
yeah,
their futures, and they're willing to put all those customers before their family for just a couple of hours.
yeah, yeah, that's it. And I think that's what I was getting at before when I'm like, if you can retake control and know that, hey, I'm the business owner, I'm in control. It doesn't matter what time I start work.
Yeah,
It doesn't. Yeah. If it doesn't matter what time I finish work. Yeah. You can work through to midnight. Doesn't mean if you work through to midnight, it doesn't mean you're going to get greater results than someone who finishes at 4.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
certainly not in when you would add up all the trade-offs that you make and where you end up as two different people. And I think
Yeah,
there's this big mantra, and I see it peddled a fair bit. It's just like you got to outwork everyone. You got to work harder. Like the reason why you're not successful is you're not working hard enough. And
hustle,
like
hustle, hustle.
yeah, this hustle culture, and I just like you don't need to like hustling is not sacrificing your family relationships of an evening to progress your
Yeah,
business forward. There's elements of hustle, but you should be hustling in the right capacity and within the right framework that it's not hindering anything else that you want in life.
yeah, absolutely. And would you say, like, so we're talking about like the transitions, right? And the sacrifices that you have to make. But like as you transition from, so like if we're speaking to someone who's absolutely in that hustle, 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 they're hustling 12 to 14 hours a day. They know that they could be putting time, that they know they're losing connection in their relationships or their families. Um, I mean, where's the mindset shift in that? What does it take to shift your mindset into being okay with, taking a foot out of the business just for a couple of hours to spend it with those people who are so important in your life?
Yeah, well, I think it takes discipline for starters. Like
Hmm.
you need to identify the value. So is an extra 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever that equation looks like, in your business going to produce you more valuable output than those same hours invested into your home life, family,
Yeah,
friends, relationships? Yeah. And most people would sit there with a sober mind and go, well, no, of course not. I'd much rather put that time into my family and enjoy those experiences. Yeah. But in that heat of business, you're just like, oh, I just need to do this. And when you start a business, you join an illustrious club of people whose job is never done. You're never finished.
yes. Yeah,
There's no
it's
finish.
always something. It is
There's always
always
something.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could work 24 hours a day,
Mm,
7 days a week.
yeah.
Then the only reason you don't is because you need to sleep for a
And it's
lot of
like
people.
the sooner you can get comfortable with the fact that there is always something, then the more comfortable you will be.
You gotta stop at some stage. Now, most people that get sucked into this doing ridiculous hours at the sacrifice of their family, most people stop at something being, oh, I'm going to fall asleep. I've got to go to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a physical barrier that they can no longer move through. But you can create those barriers with good discipline.
Mm-hmm.
That barrier can be 4 o'clock, like Greg had.
Yes.
That's it. And when you create barriers, you actually play to a great um, like cognitive power drive, like in the fact that most people, especially small business owners and entrepreneurs, are incredibly good at working to a deadline. Like if you
Yes.
ask any of our members, if I gave you a tight deadline, would you hit it? Yeah, I'd find a way to hit it.
Yeah.
And the deadline doesn't change. It's not
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
many hours you put in. The deadline's there. It's how hard you work up until that moment. And without a deadline on your day, you don't have the right accountability to put the intensity into the hours that you actually do work.
Yes.
So sometimes you can produce a really custard level of intensity for a very long period of time at the detriment of a lot of people around you
Yeah.
for an outcome that if you had the right mindset and approach to it, you could have achieved that in 6 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it took you 10
Yeah.
because you actually had no finish time. It's like if you were to schedule the guys in the field a job and just be like, here you go, here's a job, and not put an end time on it, they would
Mm.
make it take as long as it took.
Yeah.
But if you put, I need you guys to do this job in 2 hours, they'd find a way to do it in 2 hours.
Make sure it was done. So I guess to summarize sort of what we're saying, it's determine the value of what you're doing, so business over your relationships,
Yeah.
and then set up a deadline of make sure you
Let's
can work to your time.
On deadlines, let's look at this as well. Like not just, I think a daily deadline is really good. Like people that execute a schedule with discipline get
Mm.
way more done and they live happier lives. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, so if you can structure that and you can hit the things that with discipline that's in your calendar, so you start to stop times, for example, then you'll have the capacity to be where you want to be and do the
Yeah.
things that you choose to put into that calendar. So that element of discipline and deadline is good, but more importantly, deadline on how long do you exist in a particular phase of business for.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just say I'm at the startup phase and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the only way that I'm going to get some traction and get out of this startup phase with any sort of intent is I'm going to have to do some nights here.
Yeah.
So create a deadline on the nights. It's like I'm going to work Tuesday night and I'm going to work
Mm-hmm.
Thursday night. And I'm going to have that discussion with my family and they're going to be aware that this is what we're going to do. And I'm going to do this until this point.
Yeah. And I
I'm
think
going to,
that's a really key part though is communicate the deadline to your partner so they also know what's going on as well, like I'm going to put in this much work but just know it's only for this certain amount of time.
yeah. And I see this with people and I coach guys on this all the time. The old, I've got to go back to the office after dinner. So they're there
Mm.
for dinner and they're like, I just got to go do some quotes, got to go do some invoices, got to tidy up books. And they lob back into the office after dinner
Yeah.
and they're just there working.
Yeah.
No timeline, no deadline. They're just like, I'm back in the office now. So they're like, oh,
Yes.
what's this email? Oh, I'm going to look up this on YouTube. Oh, I got to do that. And
Always
7:30
working.
turns into 8:30, 9:30, 10:30.
Yeah.
But if they'd said, I'm going back to the office for 1 hour,
Yeah. You
the
can be so much more
priorities change.
efficient.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
only got an hour. My wife knows that. My kids know that. I'm like, boom, I'm in here for an hour. I just got to get the important stuff done. And you work with some intensity, not like, oh, what a day. All right, what have I got to do? And you just lob into it with this really low energy, really low intensity. I liken it to for the for the guys listening in the field. It's like how frustrating would it be if you watch someone pack the van up and take one tool back at a time?
Yeah.
Yeah, you blow up deluxe because you're like, what are you doing? That's so inefficient.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then when you get into the office, you have all these inefficiencies that bleed into your day that anyone with an admin background would look at you
Yeah.
going, what are you doing? You're taking
But
one
you're the
tool back.
boss. But you're the
Exactly.
boss, so no one else looks at it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's so easy to, you know, see why you wouldn't do that in a field capacity and yet fall victim to it in an admin capacity. One of the ways to rectify that is just to set that deadline on yourself. If you only have an hour after dinner in the office and then like someone rings the bell, it's time for you to come back out because you have to have an adult conversation with your wife, for example, yeah,
Yeah.
uh, then what you do in that hour will be the most important,
Yeah.
and it will be at an intensity level that actually gets something done.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So to summarize that whole thing, it's like find the value in switching off and being with your family, get a deadline, create a deadline, be as efficient as you can and effective in that deadline, and then know that it's always something, but then getting comfortable with that knowing that there's always something.
Yeah.
I think that like from like what we just talked about though, that sort of summarizes like how to get that balance right. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, I think that work-life balance, it's like this, it's this mystique, this mantra that people chase.
Yeah,
Yeah. And yet no one sits down and actually works out what their optimal work-life balance actually looks like.
absolutely.
So they just like, I think I'll find work-life balance when I miraculously line up my schedule and I just feel in harmony with what it is.
Yeah,
But nothing in life, predictably, nothing in life will come if you just wait for it to occur like that. So you first need to get clear on what work-life balance is for you
yeah,
and your family. So not just for you, because for you as a business owner, you might be like, hey, yeah, so my work-life balance is 10 hours at work, a couple hours of sleep, and then a coffee with
yeah,
my wife.
yeah, yeah,
Just, but the with the family unit, you work out, okay, what does this balance look like? Yeah, we need to be able to generate some money so we can live the lifestyle that we want, and that comes
yeah,
from doing work. But we also don't want to miss out on a whole heap of things as a family and different um, experiences that we can achieve. So I think we need this much time in our schedule per week as a family to be able to nurture that and make sure that you know we're all vibing and everyone's got the right amount of time together. And so that then forms the barriers for how much time you can spend at work.
yeah, yeah. And being
I of,
clear about those.
I often have coached people on filling their calendar for work-life balance. I know it's we're
Yeah,
going sideways, but um, I go, most people will use their calendar completely back to front. They use their calendar or their schedule for jobs and clients.
yeah,
I've got this meeting, I've got this job, I've got this job, and then it fills out. And I'm like, let's wipe the calendar for a second, come back. I go, what are the things that are most important to you in life and bring you the most amount of joy?
yes.
Put them in first. So then you put in like kids sport on the weekend, this and that, date night, and all this sort of jazz. Yeah, that all
Yeah.
goes in first. Then you go, the second most important thing is life admin. No one ever thinks about this, but this is the
I
stuff that
know,
breaks
I
your
know.
back.
Yes.
Breaks your back when you're under pressure. It's like
Yeah.
mowing the lawns, it's cleaning the house. It's like all the little
Paying the
things,
rates. Yeah.
yeah, that has to get done that no one ever puts the right amount of time aside for. And
Yeah.
then it's the thing that creates the friction. It's the you
Yes.
haven't done this at home, and you're like, get off my case. Like,
Yeah. Yes.
yeah. So that goes in second, and then the third thing you put in is business admin. And you place that into your boxes, and then most people are very surprised at how little space is actually left to do the work.
Yeah. And like just to finish up, like as we go, it's just like I mean, back to where we even begun. It's the reason why you became a business, like you're self-employed in the first place, so you could do
Yeah.
more of the things you love. So it sounds like you're putting that calendar together, put in the things you love and work around that.
Yeah.
And of
Not
course, mowing the lawns. Put that in
yeah,
there.
no, yeah. You just like what that does, that calendar exercise, like I do that with some of our guys, and what it does is they go, oh, there's not much space left. And I'm like, well, in reality, that's all the space you have to live a balanced life.
Yeah,
I'm like, otherwise, you want to do more? What are we taking out? Because
yeah.
anything more that you do eats into space that is already
What are
taken
you
care of.
willing to sacrifice in the
Yeah,
long run? Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's absolutely awesome, Kirk. Thank you so much for being my first guest. Um, Such
my
gold in
pleasure.
there.
That
Yes,
was good
awesome. Did
fun.
you did you have fun?
Yeah, of course I had fun.
Great. All right, man. Well, you are so welcome back anytime.
Cool. Yeah, let's line up some other topics and we'll
Yeah.
knock some more out.
Wicked. All right, dude. I'll see you in a minute when you come back through the office.
Okay, see ya.
See ya. You've been listening to the Tradies Family Podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast if you like what you've heard and share it with your friends. We'll be back next week with more community support and advice. But in the meantime, you can follow us on socials at The Tradies Family or email us at thetradesfamily@academygroup.io. We love to hear from you. Bye for now.